There's a quiet lie that shapes most of our lives. There's this belief that's so deeply rooted, especially for many men, that it becomes invisible. It sounds like this. It says, I'm too much. I'm not wanted, or I'm a burden. Now, you might not say it out loud. You might not even consciously think it, but you feel it. It's like the background noise in your relationships, or your silence, or your hesitation to even reach out. And it shows up when you don't text first because you don't want to be annoying, or when you don't share how you feel because you don't want to make it awkward for others, and you don't ask for help because you don't want to be someone's problem. You don't cry in front of anyone because they already have enough on their plate. See, this isn't humility. This is internalized exile. And too many men are living with this kind of an exile. They're convinced that to matter, they must first minimize. That to be loved, they must not need too much from others. That to be safe, they must stay small. So this episode is about naming that lie and breaking that lie, because you were never a burden. You were born to matter. Now, where does this burden story begin? Well, what's the initial genesis of this? For many boys, the message started very early. It said you fall and you're told, get up, don't cry. When you ask for help and you hear, figure it out. When you express confusion or fear and the response is irritation or avoidance. And the lesson is this: your needs are inconvenient, your feelings are disruptive, your presence is something that has to be managed. And some of us grew up in families where emotions were dangerous to express, where showing sadness invited punishment, or where care was only given if you earned it. Others of us grew up in emotionally flat households where no one asked the deeper questions and no one lingered in tenderness, and where everyone survived by staying numb. And over time, boys learn to stop reaching out. They stop asking, they stop expressing. And it's not because they're strong, but it's because they don't want to be seen as weak, as needy, as annoying. And so they shrink quietly, consistently, deeply. See, the invisibility of being too much is a narrative that we grow up with and we get indoctrinated in. And what happens to a boy who carries that story into their adulthood? He becomes a man who never quite believes that he belongs. He, he enters friendships with caution, afraid of overwhelming others. He enters relationships while holding back, afraid that if he shares too much, they're going to leave. He enters community and doesn't take up space on purpose. He becomes a ghost in his own life, not because he wanted to disappear, but because he thinks that what keeps him safe is being small. And this invisibility doesn't come with a dramatic explosion. It arrives quietly. So you stop initiating and you stop asking and you stop imagining that you could be someone that is worthwhile for others to be close to. And you become someone who only allows yourself to be loved if it looks effortless, if it costs the other person nothing. But here's the problem. Love always costs something. Not in a transactional kind of way, but in a human way. And if you only allow yourself to be loved when it's easy, well, you'll never experience love that's real. See, the cost of shrinking yourself is heavy. When you believe that you're a burden and you start shrinking, it takes a toll, not just emotionally, but spiritually, relationally, even physically. And so you sit on the edge of the couch instead of leaning back. You apologize before sharing an opinion that you have. You say it's fine when it's not. And you hide your grief and you withhold your joy. You downplay your presence because this is what you've been trained to do to survive. And at first it seems to work. People don't pull away and you don't get rejected and you seem easy to be around for the most part. But then the loneliness starts to set in because no one is connecting with you. They're connecting with the version of you who's trying to be harmless. It's like a mask, if you will. And being harmless is not the same as being safe. It's not the same as being known. When you shrink yourself, people don't get the chance to love the full version of you. The deep down part that you know that exists. The one that has been buried for such a long season. And that's why even in relationships, you can still feel alone. But how does this connect to the incel experience and the incel culture? You see, many men in the incel community carry this deep sense of unworthiness. They're not just angry about rejection, they're convinced that they were never meant to be wanted, that their very presence is flawed at the very core, and that desire was always for someone else and never for them. This is not just about the ideology, it's really about grief. See, grief for the touch that they never received, grief for the affection that never arrived, grief for the invitations that never came, grief for the silence that was never explained. And when that grief goes unspoken, it turns into shame. And shame says, I shouldn't have wanted so much, or I shouldn't have reached out. I shouldn't have extended myself. I should have known better. It teaches men that their very need for love makes them pathetic. And so they retreat further, and they harden more, and they hide deeper. And slowly, a belief begins to form. And that belief says, if I disappear enough, maybe I'll stop hurting. But the hurt does not stop because the longing was never the problem. The isolation was the problem. And isolation does not heal longing. Instead, it just calcifies it. But here's what it means to be allowed to matter. Consider this, if you will. To matter is not just about being loved. It's about being allowed to take up emotional space in someone else's world. To be allowed to matter means means that your absence is noticed. It means that your needs are valid. It means that your emotions are welcomed and that your presence actually does make a difference. But here's the thing. If you don't believe that you're allowed to matter, you'll never let people fully see you. You'll instead sabotage any opportunity for closeness. You'll pull away when things get deep. You'll say things like, don't worry about it. I'm good. When what you really mean is, please don't leave. Being allowed to matter starts with this internal shift. It's where you stop asking, am I too much? And instead you start affirming, I am allowed to be here, fully, honestly, even vulnerably. And that shift doesn't happen in a day, but it begins with a sense of awareness. And today, that awareness is already beginning as you're listening to this and tracking. See, when kindness feels conditional, you're always on edge. So let's talk about this thing that almost no one really addresses or admits out loud. That's that many men don't believe that people are kind to them because they are worthy. They believe that they're kind to them because they're behaving properly, and this is a reward. You might be familiar with this inner script, right? This storyline. You'll say things like, they're only being nice to me because I am useful. Or if I ask for too much, they'll blitz. Or if I stop being easygoing, they're going to withdraw. If I'm ever a burden, they're going to regret letting me in. So you tiptoe, you smile, you suppress, you keep the discomfort down, you anticipate what others want and become that, like a professional people pleaser. And this creates a false version of connection, one where you're only lovable when you're undemanding, right? And if that's your foundation, the relationship becomes extremely fragile and brittle. Not because the other person doesn't care, but it's because you never feel safe enough to stop performing. Conditional kindness is not connection. And you deserve more than being tolerated for how well you self-abandon. The armor of self-sufficiency is another component we must address. You see, one of the greatest myths that men are sold is that independence equals strength. You're taught that needing nothing makes you admirable, that doing it all alone is a badge of honor, and that asking for support makes you weak or clingy or burdensome. So what do we do? What do we do with this? Well, men in this setting usually armor up. They learn to fix their own pain and manage their own crises, swallow their own sadness, and never show when they're struggling because the world has convinced them that needing help is fundamentally a flaw. But self-sufficiency isn't always strength, is it? Sometimes it's self-protection. It's what happens when you believe that no one can hold the weight of your pain without eventually dropping you. And the result is you become someone who others think is fine, but on the inside you're barely holding it together. You don't need to be rescued, but you do need to know that it's going to be okay to lean on someone. I mean, even pillars that you see on buildings need a rest, right? The shame of being seen as needy is another Achilles heel. There's a particular kind of shame that many men are carrying, and that's the shame of being witnessed in the midst of their need. Not just needing like affection or support, but actually being seen in the act of needing it is extremely disconcerting for many men. And the moment your voice cracks, for example, or the moment your hand trembles when you're reaching out, whew, the moment that you say, I'm scared, and then you brace for the disgust, the moment that you admit, I feel alone, and wait for the silence, these are the moments when shame whispers, you're embarrassing, or you're weak, or they'll never look at you the same way again. And that shame trains you to hide and to bury and to disappear. And here's the paradox. The moments that feel most shameful are often those moments that actually create the deepest opportunities for experiencing intimacy. Not because you were polished, but because you were authentic and genuine and real in that moment. Because someone saw you in your unguarded state and they chose to stay. That's where real safety is built. It's not built around your strengths, it's built around your honesty. And when people actually want to care for you, many men do not know how to respond. It might be hard to believe, but this is true. There are people in this world who want to care for you. There are people in this world who, not out of pity, but and not out of obligation, but out of a sense of love and out of a sense of joy and out of a sense of real connection and desire for it, want to reach out to you. People who want to know how your heart is. People who want to know more than what your plans are. They want to hold space for your silence and not just your stories. People who feel honored to just be in your company and not burdened, especially when you trust them with your pain. But if you're convinced that your needs are a nuisance, you won't even let these people get close to you at all. Instead, you'll deflect compliments, you'll redirect concern, you'll downplay your struggles, and you'll say, "I'm fine." And you'll say that on autopilot. And they'll believe you because they think that that's what you really truly want. Meanwhile, deep down, you're aching for someone to just push past the deflection and say, "I see you and I'm not going anywhere. I'm here with you in this present moment." Let yourself want that. Let yourself receive that, as difficult as it is. This takes a rewriting of the internal storylines and narratives that we have in our minds. See, if you've believed that your whole life that you're a burden, that belief doesn't just disappear overnight. It doesn't disapparaate. It's not just an idea. It's a storyline. It's one that's shaped your self-perception and your behaviors and even your relationships. But here's the good news. These kind of stories can be rewritten. Not erased, but reauthored with more truth and more kindness and more courage. And it begins with small shifts from "I shouldn't say this" to "I'm allowed to speak and this is my truth." From saying things like, "Oh, they'll leave if I ask," to saying things like, "The right people, they're going to stay when I ask." From saying things as, I have to manage everyone else's comfort, and instead saying, "I get to be a full human too amongst others in community." From saying things like, "I'm too much," to saying, "I'm enough even in the midst of my needs." You see, you don't have to be fake in your confidence. You just have to stop reinforcing the shame. And every time you choose honesty over hiding, you're building a new pattern in your neural networks. Every time you let someone in, you challenge the story that says that no one is going to stay. But there's a kind of life that you're allowed to build that most people don't know is available. So dream with me just a wee bit, if you would. What does a life look like where you're allowed to matter? What is it like where your phone rings because someone actually wants to hear your voice? Where your joy is celebrated and not resented? Where your sadness is not a problem for someone to fix, but a place for someone to sit beside you through? Where you can show up messy and still feel that sense that you're genuinely wanted. It's a life that you don't have to prove your very worth every time you walk into the room. Where you don't shrink and minimize your voice to keep the peace. Where you are held and not just tolerated. That kind of life is not a fantasy. It's not reserved for people who are more attractive or more charismatic or more healed than you are. This is the kind of life that's available to anyone who begins showing up in the world as someone who actually believes and says things like, "I'm not a burden. I'm a person and I get to take up space in this moment, in this area." Let's maybe just talk a little bit about the trap of being the strong one, always the one who's the strong one. Some people, men, they become good at holding it all together and no one ever asks if they're okay because they're so compelling in their competence. You're the one who listens, you're the one who fixes and who shows up and makes the jokes, you're the one who stays calm and who handles everything. And somewhere along the way, you became the strong one. You became the one who held it together for everyone. But strength in this context, it becomes a performance. And it's one that keeps everyone comfortable around you while internally you're crumbling. And so you don't show your fear because people are depending on you. You don't name your tiredness and fatigue because someone always has it worse, right? You don't break down because you don't think you're allowed to. And so instead of connection, you get admiration. Instead of intimacy, you get distance. Instead of care, you get solitude. The strong one is often the loneliest one in the room. Because strength without softness is armor. And armor doesn't let love through. You don't have to stop being strong. You just need to let someone hold you and see your humanity. Letting others be the strong ones for you is a difficult transition for many who are in this space. One of the most powerful shifts a man can make is this: letting someone else hold you. Not physically, per se, although that also matters. But letting someone hold you emotionally, energetically, spiritually. Letting someone say, you don't have to carry this alone. Letting someone hear the full story. Letting someone witness the pain without rushing to fix it. Letting someone love the version of you that isn't polished or prepared. But that takes trust, doesn't it? And for many men, trust has been broken more than once. And so they build self-sufficiency, not out of confidence, but out of a sense of fear, because the last time they leaned on someone, they fell. And rebuilding trust means giving others a chance to prove that they're different. It means risking discomfort for the possibility of support. It means letting the vulnerability out. Not all at once, but slowly, safely, consistently. Because the only way to learn that you're not a burden is to let someone carry part of you. And then you watch. Watch them stay. Watch them take space and be comfortable with you. Loneliness isn't just a lack of people. At the core, it's a lack of permission. You see, there's this myth that loneliness is all about being alone. But here's the thing, you can actually be surrounded by people and still feel completely unseen. You can be in a relationship and still feel like you don't exist. You can actually have followers and fans and even friends, and it can still feel like no one actually knows your personality or your blueprints. And that's because real belonging is not about proximity. It's more about permission. Permission to speak when it's not easy. Permission to feel when it's not convenient. Permission to matter even when you're not performing. And without that kind of permission, connection is just choreographing. And when you've gone years without true permission to show up as yourself, you start forgetting what that even feels like. But here's the thing, you can reclaim it. And it starts by giving yourself the permission first. You can say things like, I'm allowed to speak, or I'm allowed to cry, I'm allowed to reach, I'm allowed to need. Say it often. Say it badly. Say it even when you're scared. But just say it until your body starts to believe it. And here's why intimacy feels so dangerous for many in this community. Let's name something hard for a moment here, shall we? For many men, intimacy feels more terrifying than isolation. Because intimacy requires exposure, and exposure requires safety. But if you've never had a safe place to land, exposure feels very much like danger. And so, even when someone offers that sense of closeness, your nervous system might react with panic. They're getting closer. They're getting too close, you might say to yourself. Or what if they see the real me and I'm not enough? What if I get hurt again? What if they leave once they know the real me? See, this is not irrational questions. These are trauma infused questions. And your body remembers when it was dropped or ignored or criticized, when it was mocked or even abandoned. And it's doing everything it can to protect you. But protection that lasts for far too long, it eventually becomes this kind of a prison, doesn't it? To experience intimacy, you have to let your guard down just a little bit at a time, not recklessly, and not all at once, but just doing it intentionally with people who show consistency, with people who respond with care, and with people who aren't rushing you through the process. Intimacy is earned, not with perfection, but with presence. So let me just say, you're not here to be useful. You're here to be known. So many men build their identities around being useful. If you're helpful, they think people won't leave. If you're entertaining, they think people will keep you around, right? If you're successful, people will admire you. If you're needed, maybe you'll be loved. But usefulness is a really shaky foundation, especially for belonging. Because the moments that you can't perform, you fear losing everything that gave meaning to your belonging. Real connection is not based on utility. It's instead based on just being, on existing, on mattering. Not what you do, but who you are. You are not a subscription service. You're not a fixer. You're not a support animal for everyone else's emotions. You are a human being who deserves to care even when you have nothing to offer but yourself. Let that truth start to reshape how you show up, not as a function, but as a flesh and blood human being. What if you could let yourself matter? I mean, consider that question. You may have never asked it before. What would it feel like if you let yourself truly matter? Not as a reward, not as a fantasy, but as a fact. What would you do differently? Would you speak more freely, perhaps? Would you let someone else hold your hand a little bit longer? Would you stop apologizing every time you needed something, perhaps? Would you finally tell the truth about what you're actually going through and experiencing in life? Letting yourself matter isn't arrogance. It's alignment. It's saying, I am part of this world and I also get to take up space in this world. I am not disposable. And when you live like you matter, the way others treat you begins to shift. Because people follow your lead. Even when you honor your presence, you're inviting others to do the same as well. And that's how you start to build a life where you're not just existing, but you're also experiencing belonging. But it's also important to make peace with the fear of rejection. Let's talk about that a little bit in the next few moments. Being honest here, when you start showing up as more of yourself and expressing your needs and your emotions and your longing, the risk for rejection is very real. Not everyone will be able to hold what you're bringing. Not everyone will respond with kindness. Not everyone will stay. And that's terrifying. That's a terrifying prospect. But here's what's even more terrifying. What's more terrifying is living your whole life unseen, untouched, unexpressed, because you're too afraid to find out who would actually stay. It's true, rejection hurts, but self-erasing yourself slowly kills you. When you live by hiding the version of you that really wants connection, that part never gets a chance. So make peace with the risk of rejection. Not because it's not going to hurt, it is going to hurt, but because what's on the other side of it is worth it. You see, courage is not about being fearless. Courage is about being able to love yourself enough to say, I'd rather be real and risk loss than perform and stay lonely. Choosing integrity over impression is critical. Integrity means aligning your internal values with your external behavior, right? It's what happens when you say things like, I will stop pretending to be okay just so that others are comfortable around me. Or when you say things like, I will name what I want, even if I'm scared of what others are going to say. Or even having the courage to say, I will act in a way that reflects who I truly am, not who I think I have to be to earn love. And when you live with integrity, you stop trying to be easy. You instead become honest. And honesty, it gets a different kind of love. When you're honest, you have a deeper and slower and more sustainable experience with genuine love. Because the people who love you when you're in integrity are the ones who actually see the real, genuine, authentic you. So there's no more masking, there's no more code switching between your heart and your voice, right? There's just you. The you that's still growing, the you that's still healing, the you that's still scared sometimes, but it's you, the authentic and genuine you, and that is enough. See, building relationships that don't punish your humanity is a part of the skill that is being developed in this process. The next step really is creating a life where your full self isn't just allowed, it's actually celebrated and welcomed. That starts by choosing people who don't punish your honesty, right? It starts with people who don't disappear when you're struggling, with people who don't shame you for needing rest or space or even reassurance, by choosing people who don't confuse vulnerability with weakness, who don't withhold love until you earn it. These people, they might seem rare, but they do exist. And you find them by being willing to filter for safety instead of filtering for attention. And so you stop asking, do they like me? And instead you start asking, can I be my full self with these individuals and still feel safe? It's not about building a perfect circle, but it's about creating pockets of relational safety where your nervous system can actually breathe, where connection is not earned, but instead it's exchanged. Another really important factor is letting intimacy transform and change you. You see, when you start letting others see you, like really see you, there's a significant shift internally. Your body starts to relax, especially in their presence. And you stop rehearsing every sentence in advance. Instead, you begin to believe that maybe, just maybe, you are lovable exactly as you are. And when that happens, you start experiencing that transformation, that change. It's not because someone fixed you, but it's because being seen helped you remember that you were never broken. And that's the power of true and deep, vibrant intimacy. It's not just about closeness, it's really at the heart about transformation through acceptance. And that kind of healing cannot be rushed. It comes in a quiet and ordinary moment. And then those moments build up over time. It's a text that says, I'm still here. I'm still with you. It's a friend who doesn't flinch when you cry. It's a partner who listens when you say, this is really hard for me, and they don't try to fix it. It's about a community that doesn't just cheer for your mask, but they actually cheer you for your honesty. And intimacy doesn't demand perfection. Intimacy just requires your presence, your willingness to be present in that moment. Making room for the you who wants to be held is a really important consideration, because there's a version of you that still wants to be cared for and to be seen. Even if you buried that version deep down, even if you mocked that version of yourself, even if you taught yourself to live without that version of you, he's still there. That version of you who wants softness and who wants to be chosen and not just respect and to be useful, who wants to experience rest and not just to provide. This version who wants to be loved and not just endured. You don't need to shame him any longer. You don't need to, you just need to make some room for him to come back out, to give him a seat at the table of your identity. Let him speak up in your decisions. Let him have a voice to reach out to other people who feel warm. Let him say things like, I don't want to carry this alone anymore. Because that version of you, the one who dares to want and holds that version is the one that holds the key to connection that you've been longing for. You can still be grounded and wise and resilient, and also at the same time long to be held and cared for. That longing is not a weakness. It's proof that your heart is still alive. But let's reclaim the right to matter together, shall we? So here we are at the heart of all that we've been talking about so far. All that's to say this: you matter. You matter not because of your productivity, not because you are strong, not because you're good at hiding the pain. It's not because someone picked you. No, you matter because you're here, because you're breathing, because your presence carries weight. And every time that you show up as your full self, you're reclaiming this birthright that was never meant to be questioned. And the right to take up space is still there. The right to speak when it's hard is still available. The right to be celebrated in your softness, the right to exist without apology. All of this is up for the grabs. This could be your life, and you are not a burden in the midst of it. Let me talk a little bit about this bridge back to belonging. This series is called A Bridge Back to Us, but this bridge, this episode isn't just a message. It's at the heart an invitation to stop living like your existence is inconvenience, to stop shrinking to preserve the comfort of others around you, to stop apologizing for needs that your feelings and your desires express, saying that you want to be held. You don't need to disappear to deserve love. You don't need to perform to belong. You are allowed to be fully here, even in the midst of your grief, even with your desire for longing, and even in the currency of doubts that you're navigating. There is a bridge back to belonging, and this bridge is built through integrity, which is living aligned with your worth, and it's crossed through the courageous expression of intimacy, where you're letting others see what you've spent years hiding. And every time that you take a step toward that bridge, no matter how small that step is, you're telling the world this. You're telling the world that I was never a burden. I was never too much, and I am allowed to matter. And I choose to stay. You got this.